Hello and welcome everyone to this repair video about the Logitech G910 Orion Spectrum RGB gaming keyboard. It's going to be specifically about the volume control on this device and the rotary encoder that's behind it. To demonstrate the problem, I'm going to slowly increase and decrease the volume constantly, and then you can have a look at the actual readout in Windows. And you're going to see two things. First of all, there's going to be jumps. So for example, even though I'm going to increase the volume, it's going to jump back sometimes. And secondly, the sensitivity is quite inconsistent. So sometimes the volume is rising relatively fast and sometimes it takes a lot of time to actually increase the volume. And the latter might not be a defect of the rotary encoder, but just a design flaw, but we will get into that. So now take a look at the video. And especially around 19, watch what happens. So it was already over 19, it was at 23 and then it jumped back all the way to 19 and 18 before it started coming back again. So the same thing happened here. I'm constantly decreasing the volume, but at 19 it still jumped back up. So this was a short demonstration of what the actual problem looks like. And now let's talk about how we can fix it. But before we get into the actual repair, I want to talk a little bit about why it is that this problem is so annoying to me. And if you're just here for the repair, I have a link down in the description so that you can skip right to the start of the repair. So I've been always a fan of Logitech products, especially mice and keyboards, all the way since I bought my first PC in the year 2001. And together with that PC, I got a Logitech cordless desktop MX3000. This is a set of keyboard and mouse. And believe it or not, this keyboard is still working and it's still in use after now 18 years and it's still working. To be fair, the rotary encoder on that keyboard also failed, but that was in the year 2016. So 15 years after I bought the keyboard, which is I think fairly okay for an everyday use of the keyboard. Then, in the meantime, I went at some point for the Logitech G910 gaming keyboard, the original old version with the blue backlight and the foldable LCD. And I really love this keyboard and I would still really prefer to use it, but of course it's not manufactured anymore. And that was in use for 8 years, and the rotary encoder in that one still worked flawlessly after that 8 years. The problem I had with it, and the reason why I had to upgrade, was that this is a membrane keyboard, meaning that when you open it up you don't see individual keys. Instead you see those membranes that make up all the individual keys. In this picture you can see it a little bit better, but the problem is that the conductive layer on these membranes tends to oxidize over time and just get bad. And you can replace it with silver ink, and I've tried it a couple of times, but in the end it's not a solid fix. So this is the reason why membrane keyboards will eventually die. So I thought, okay, there is this Logitech G910 keyboard. It's a mechanical keyboard, and I personally don't really care about the feel or the clickiness of mechanical keyboards. But what I was interested in is that the fact that when a key on this keyboard should fail at some point in time, you could just replace the individual switch and have the whole keyboard back and running. And when you look through the page, you also see that it's designed and marketed as incredibly durable, and these switches ensure lasting precision and are rated for 70 million keystrokes each. And personally, I cannot put that into perspective to a real use case, but it sounds like these switches will basically last forever. So I thought, yeah, the keyboard is relatively pricey with 120 euros. But if it's gonna last so long and if I'm able to replace the switches, it may be a good deal. So I bought it, and that was about a little more than 1 year ago. And now I'm having this issue with the rotary encoder. And for me, this is not just bad luck, I think, or I don't think that I have a unit that really has a particularly bad example of this rotary encoder in it. Instead, I really think that Logitech put this cheap, badly designed rotary encoder in here to have a part in that keyboard that will still fail. So if you imagine if you bought this keyboard with all these reliable switches and it will last for 5 years easily, I think, and if you treat it well, it could easily last also 10 years. So Logitech had to think of a way to make this keyboard fail anyway, and I definitely think that they put this shitty rotary encoder in here so that you have to buy a new keyboard, or that you tend to buy a new keyboard even after just 1 or 2 years. And for me, this is definitely another case of planned obsolescence. I know there is a big discussion if planned obsolescence is really a thing or if it's just made up. But personally, I really believe that it is a thing. And I really believe that in this case, the rotary encoder is so bad, not because they just chose a bad rotary encoder because they didn't have any choices, but instead really they put it in so that it will fail and that you have a weak point in this keyboard to make it fail after a certain amount of time. And that really pisses me off, because with a mechanical keyboard you really aim for longevity. And then to see that Logitech put in the worst rotary encoder they ever have, as far as I can tell with my experience, in a mechanical keyboard is just, it really feels bad. Especially with the customer support about that, but more on that later. So let's get to the actual repair now. So what you're going to do at first is turn the keyboard around and then remove this handrest. So it looks like there are two different plastic parts on the back side. One is this lower section that is held in by 5 screws, and then there is this bigger section on top. And right now I'm just gonna undo the screws for this bigger section. So all the 5 screws here on the top. If you push this arc stock to the back, you can see 2 more screws that I'm gonna undo now. And it looks like we also have to undo the 5 screws on the bottom portion. And it appears to be that Logitech is doing something they have done quite a lot in the last years, which is putting screws underneath these rubber parts so that you have to rip them off before. And I'm not sure if you can stick that back on there later on properly, we'll see. So far I found this one screw in the center here. I just found 2 more of these hidden screws here and here. Luckily you can access those without removing the whole pad. And then you should be able to get that whole lower section of plastic out by sliding underneath with a credit card and then just popping all the hooks that hold it back in. And there you have it. That's the first plastic piece out. And now you see a couple more screws that I'm gonna undo now. So then let's see what the next step might be. Okay, now you get this acrylic piece out, so that if you want to change or hide the number of your keyboard, you can do that. Now that we have undone the screws on the bottom side, we can continue on the top side and remove the uppermost layer of the keyboard housing. So if you look to this side, this is the cutout that you want to go into with your credit card or whatever. So there you go, but I have to admit this step took a lot more force than I'm usually comfortable applying to a unit like this. but apparently that's the way to go. And now we can see down here is our rotary encoder and assembly. Let's get a little bit closer. So there's a couple of things you can see here. This left part is the part that you can actually access from the outside. And then on this small PCB we have the actual, let's call it rotary encoder. And I can now see that it's not plugged in, it's soldered in directly. So to get it out, you first have to undo this screw and then get the soldering iron to remove the electrical connections. So I just popped out the actual rotary part and I can pull that now to the outside. And there's the rotary plastic part. And there's the little daughter board. Just a 3-pin connection, so we're gonna unsolder that now. What I'm going to do first is apply a little bit of fresh solder to the 3 connections of the cable. And now I'll try to heat them all at once. And if you manage to heat all the 3 connections at once, you can just pull the board off like I just did. And now we can take a closer look at that. And here you can see the board now with the rotary encoder in it. And I can honestly say this is by far the worst rotary encoder I've ever seen. It doesn't have any markings or naming on it. It's just mainly plastic. It feels really cheap. And yeah, so now we have to try to get that desoldered from the board. So I'm going to use my solder pump to get all the connections on the bottom loose. Sadly right now I don't have my macro lens here, so I have to do with this shot. And I also don't have a proper vise, so this is gonna be a little bit ghetto. While I'm here, I'm also gonna clean these 3 holes for the cable. So that should be it for now. Now we can try to get that rotary encoder off the board. Okay, here we finally are. After a lot of desoldering attempts and a lot of wiggling back and forth, I was finally able to get that rotary encoder off that board. I have to say, if you're not familiar with soldering, this might be very frustrating work. But yeah, now we have that thing out, and now what we're gonna do is we're gonna bend those 4 little bent pieces of metal back so that we can get the plastic inner parts out. And these bent pieces are actually only meant to be bent once in their life, so be very gentle and try to put as little force as possible on these pins. Now as you can see, all these 4 pins have been bent outwards. And now we should be able to separate the inner layers of the rotary encoder. Okay, what I had to do additionally, there are these 2 tiny black spots of plastic that protrude to the metal piece. I just cut them off, and now it appears that I can now separate the plastic pieces. And there we go. And now we can finally see what makes up the rotary encoder. So this is the stationary part that has the 3 electrical connections on it. And as you maybe can see on this video, there is inside a certain pattern of conductive and non-conductive areas. And then here's the rotating part, which has 3 wipers. So depending on how it's rotated, these 3 wipers move along these conductive and non-conductive paths and make or break connections, which then the keyboard can sense and turn into rotational information. So what I'm going to do now is take my isopropyl alcohol and clean off all the residue that might be on this or on this part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a little bit of isopropyl alcohol to the toothbrush. And then just clean whatever is inside this part. I'm going to do the same with the rotary part. Be a little more careful with this one because there are springs on it and you don't want to bend them in any direction too far. So that should do it. Now I'm just going to wait for the excess alcohol to evaporate. Then we're going to reassemble the unit. So unfortunately at this point in time my camera battery died and I don't have a second battery at hand. But I wanted to get this project over with today, so you're going to have to bear with me here with some pictures from my phone. So this is what the cleaned rotary encoder surfaces look like. And even though right now they are cleaned and it's most likely going to work, I'm not going to trust this rotary encoder to work a long time at all, and I think it will develop a similar problem soon. If you have a close look, you can see the traces of the wipers that have already eroded some of the material on here, some of the metal. You can see, for example, here there's a shard, so it's not really properly machined and held together. You can also see that these 2 wipers are not really parallel, they're slightly bent, and this didn't happen due to my cleaning. This was how it was before. So this rotary encoder in general is just a very, very badly produced and a very cheap part, and it simply cannot operate properly for more than a couple of months, I think. So I'm going to put this back together now, hope that it works then, and see what I do in the future. So the ideal way here would be to actually replace this rotary encoder with a proper one, but this is going to be hard to find in this size. If any of you have maybe a recommendation for a proper rotary encoder we could put in here, I'd happily try that out, because this piece of plastic will not last very long. But okay, let's continue with the reassembly. And now you want to take a small amount of lubricant, put it on there, and then gently distribute it over the whole area of these electrical contacts. And then it looks a little bit like this. Now you can start to reassemble it. So the first step is going to be to put the rotary part back on top. And then get that whole thing back into its metal enclosure. So you want to insert that whole plastic part with the shaft going to the bottom. Like this. And now you can rebend these 4 metal pins back on top of the plastic to make the metal pins clamp down the whole assembly. I'm going to do that off camera. So this is the whole rotary encoder assembly after I bent back these 4 metal pieces. Make sure the plastic piece is all the way pushed into the metal housing before you bend them back. And again, be very gentle when bending them because they don't take a lot of force. Here I stuck the rotary encoder assembly back into the PCB. It only goes in one way because the electrical connections are only on one side. And this is the PCB after I resoldered the rotary encoder and cleaned it a little bit. Now what you want to do is you want to put that PCB back into the keyboard, which I've done here. So this is the keyboard assembly. This is the 3-pin cable that connects to this rotary encoder PCB. I stuck the 3 pins through the board and resoldered them. Now we can put the mechanical rotary part back in. And what I found out is that it's easier to stick the shaft through the rotary encoder right now and then push the whole assembly down together. So this is how it looks. Be sure to push gently on both sides to make the shaft click into these plastic retention mechanisms. And don't forget to put in this screw. This is the only silver screw we screwed out so far. So now the rotary encoder assembly is back in place and we can start to reassemble the plastic parts of the keyboard. First is this big top part. So you want to align it and then gently push on it on more or less every surface to make sure all these retention clips clip back in. So after you do that, it should already be stuck on even if you don't put in the screws right away. So this is how it looks. Then turn the keyboard around and reinsert all the screws. So they were these screws on the bottom here, and then of course also on the top and beneath the ARX connectors. And you're going to notice that you have 2 kinds of screws, ones that are slightly smaller and the ones that are slightly bigger. For this step you have to use all the ones that are slightly bigger. And after you put in all these screws, don't forget to put in the acrylic piece that says G910. You might want to clean it at this point in time. Then put on the smaller bottom portion of the plastic pieces. This also has to be clipped in, so before you start screwing, make sure that it's clipped in all the way by gently pushing on every surface. Then put in all the screws. Don't forget the 2 screws under here and under here. And put in this one before you reattach this rubber feet. So this is what the keyboard then looks like after putting back on the palm rest. So now I'm going to connect it up and see if it works, and more so if the rotary encoder now works without glitches. Therefore we can go again into our sound panel, and now I'm going to gently increase the volume by linearly and repeatedly turning the rotary encoder in one direction. And there are 2 things you're going to notice here. First, there are no more glitches in terms of that it's not going to go in the opposite direction as I'm turning. But what you're still going to see is that the movement is relatively uneven. So sometimes it takes 2 steps right after the other, and then it doesn't react at all for actually quite a lot of angle that I'm turning this. So this appears to be a, let's call it, anomaly of the rotary encoder, because that means that the steps are not evenly apart from each other, but instead sometimes you have to just turn it farther to get the response, and sometimes the response just happens quicker. So I'm not really happy with that, and I don't know why they would design it in such a way, but this is the way it is. But at least you can see that there were no glitches anymore. So the rotary encoder is now working again as it was intended. Now we're going to see how long that lasts, and maybe I'll have to do another repair, actually replacing the rotary encoder at some point in time. So this should be enough for testing the whole thing. Now there's still a couple more things that I want to go over here. But after repairing this are even more prominent than before. So I have to admit, servicing this or taking it apart was really a lot tougher than I expected, especially the rotary encoder assembly. So thinking about replacing an individual switch if it fails is also not going to be a lot of fun, because you would have to go even deeper. You have to remove all the keycaps and 2 more plastic pieces to even get to one of the switches. So actually this unit is not really serviceable. So the idea to switch, to exchange a single switch some point in time is really a lot of effort, and I think if you try to open this unit 2 or 3 times more, you might actually end up with it being unable to come back together. So I really don't know why Logitech made it so hard to service this or to open this. I really don't like the way they manufactured this, and I really can't think of a reason why they did it. So for example, the Logitech G910 I opened also a couple of times, and there was also a trick to it, but that was due to the LCD connector. That was the only thing that was inconvenient. Otherwise it was relatively pleasant to open and reassemble the G910, and not so here, which is, I don't know, it's weird, because with mechanical keys you should be able to make it easier, and also if you don't have an LCD and not so many moving parts, it should also be easier, but somehow Logitech managed to make it a lot harder to open this device. So I don't really like that. And then a couple more things that really I don't like about this keyboard after using it for quite some time. Let's talk about the Rgb backlight. I mean, of course, RGB looks cool and everyone wants to have it these days without there being particularly a lot of reason for it. I mean, if you're using a keyboard like this, seriously, how often do you change the color? For example, I always like blue, so mine is more or less completely blue. And of course, it's nice that you can customize each and every key, and you make, for example, your WASD in a different color. But then again, who needs that? If you're actually playing some games, you know where those keys are. And if you have to look on your keyboard and find the right color to know where your keys are, then you're basically not using the keyboard, but you're learning how to use a keyboard and not playing games. So really, I don't see the point of having the ability to change the color on all keys. There's, however, one exception where these colors actually make sense, which would be the G keys, because they can have different functions, and you can't really remember, like, okay, G3 is this specific function. So I actually found it handy to make the buttons, the G buttons, in a certain color that I can remember as the program it launches or the function it has. So this is actually quite nice. But then Logitech immediately jumped in and made this feature stupid, because you have, as well as on the G910 and all other keyboards, you have 3 modes. So you can configure each and every G key in 3 different modes, mode 1, 2 and 3, to different functions. And here's the thing, you can set the software to have individual colors for each of the G keys, but they are consistent no matter what mode you are in. That means if you choose a particular color scheme that represents the programs and software and functions you have attached to these keys in mode 1, and then you go to mode 2, you don't have the possibility to change the colors again to something different. The colors stay the same. So also for the G keys, in the end, it's relatively inefficient and unusable to make them colored, because as soon as you change the mode, the colors are not valid anymore. So this is really, in the end, just a toy, these color things, in my opinion at least. I mean, if you are the kind of person that really likes to have something on your desk that flashes in all colors of the rainbow, so be it. But this is then part of this being a toy and not really part of this being any useful hardware. So I was really disappointed when I discovered that you can configure each G key with a certain color, but then as soon as you change the mode, it's gone. And I thought, like, come on guys. If you would have used your own product and thought about this and thought about what you could do with this keyboard and what not, I think you would have agreed that it would make a lot more sense that the color can be set individually for each mode than globally. Because when you set it globally, it's just a design feature. So you want to have these buttons green, okay, you can make them green, but it's not useful. To make it useful, you would have to have the ability to make them also change color when you change modes. So I don't know why they haven't implemented it, but apparently they don't really care about usability at this point. The next thing is this ARX dock. So I mean, I can imagine that it's hard to to implement an LCD into a keyboard as it was with the G15, because not so many apps will, or not so many programs or games will make use of it. So I get that it doesn't really make sense to do that. But then to invent something that you call a dock, which is just literally a piece of plastic that you can put your phone in, I don't know. I mean, yes, I get the idea to put your phone in, download an app, and have that replace your LCD. But come on, calling this a dock is just marketing wank. If it had at least a charging port, so you could put your phone there and leave it there for, let's say, 3 hours with the screen on, it would make sense. But right now, if you have an OLED phone, like most phones are these days, and you put it there and you have it running an app, it will drain the battery rather fast. And you don't want to come home, put your phone there, which might already be discharge it even further, just to have a display. If you put a dock there, then please make it an actual dock that has charging capabilities, maybe wireless charging. But just putting this plastic thing there and calling it a dock, I don't know, that's a joke, really. And the last joke then is the customer support experience I had with this. So it was, I think, 2 weeks ago when I discovered this issue with the glitch in the Rotary encoder, or let's say it was 2 weeks when I noticed it so strongly that I said, okay, I have to do something about this. I contacted Logitech customer support on their website. I filled in what product I have, and I actually took some time to explain the problem I had in quite a lot of detail, and asked what I could do, and if this is normal, or if they could send me maybe a replacement, or generally, what should I do now? Because I bought this unit, as I said, like a year ago, so it's still well within warranty. In Germany it's 2 years. And since I bought it in Germany, I contacted the German customer support in German. And then it took Logitech, I think, 4 days to give me the first response. So I filled in the whole form at the 9th of January. And I did it in German, as I said, and then I immediately got this automatic reply saying, yeah, thank you that you contacted Logitech support. Someone is going to take care. This was the 9th of January. Then it took some time. And on the 14th of January, so 5 days afterwards, I received an email. But what surprised me was that it said right here in the first line that this is an automated mail. That means that nobody has actually read what I wrote or has thought about what I could do. It's just an automatic reply saying the typical things like, yeah, reconnect it to your PC, test a different USB drive, update your firmware, whatever. So clearly this has nothing to do with my problem. It is in German, but it's translated automatically. It's actually not that badly translated automatically, but still you can tell it is. And I don't get why, if it's an automated reply, why it takes them 5 days to send me that. But okay, maybe this is how it is. That feels a little weird since I know I paid like 120 euros for a keyboard, and I am in warranty, so I actually am entitled for support. To have to wait 5 days for an automated reply, that doesn't help me the least bit. But okay, at least that's a reply, and what they do is they tell me, okay, if all these steps don't work, which of course they don't, please contact your local dealer. So basically they are saying, we won't support you, just go wherever you bought that thing and they will help you. Which, I don't know, also feels a little weird. And they say, okay, why it is that I have to contact my local retailer and not them is because the local retailer has this product in stock and can give me faster exchange. They literally say the next day. So the reason why they don't want to support me personally, but instead send me somewhere else, was because then I can get faster turnaround. This is after they took 5 days to give me an automated reply saying that. And okay. And they also say, if there's still a problem after I contacted my local retailer, we are happy to help you, it says here in German. And then I actually contacted my retailer, which is a little bit of a problem because I bought this locally in a town where I don't live anymore. But they were actually very friendly and said that I could go to a different shop that they have in my neighborhood and maybe can get it replaced there. Now the problem is that I couldn't, for the hell of it, find the receipt I got, and without the receipt I cannot get any replacement. So I would have actually gone there and have it replaced, but since I cannot find the receipt I cannot do that. But nevertheless, the local retailer was very friendly and very kind and very helpful. So there was no problem there, but still I felt kind of weird by about what Logitech is doing here. So I still contacted them and said, hey, this feels a little weird getting this automated reply that doesn't really help me. This was not what I was expecting. And remember, I still talk in German here and all the emails are in German. So I answered that in German. And then I get a new email the next day this time. You have reached European English support. I did not. I just answered an email I got. So I got this email from them with no further address or email address that I could turn to, but it said, we are happy to support you. So I thought, okay, if I answer that email, which is the only option I have right now, I get more support. So this is what I did, but somehow it ended up at the English support this time, which is not really a problem for me. I could have done it in English, but I don't get why it is that when I start a process like this on the German support side and get a German response and then send a German response back, why that then ends up with an English support. I don't really get that. So maybe there's something wrong with the Logitech support structure internally. Shouldn't be the case, but whatever. Then this apparently was forwarded to the German department, and I got another email in German again. This time I don't think it's an automated reply. And again, it's just these typical bullshit things like try to charge the battery. No. Charge it with a different cable. Reconnect the keyboard. Update the firmware. Change a different USB port. Install the software. Clean the device. And that is actually the most useful hint right now, but it doesn't work for Rotary Encoder, sadly. So again, it's now 11 days in and I still haven't had anyone actually read what I wrote. And at this point it's obvious that they cannot help me other than just replace the unit, which they won't do because it's just because only the retailers apparently do, and I cannot do because I don't have the receipt. But still, this feels very bad, this kind of support. Like actually taking your time, like taking half an hour to diagnose the problem and to really put in as much information as you have on the support side, not only to get them to support you, but also to give them maybe information what has gone wrong with your product and what they maybe should change in their production or something. And it just feels really bad and, if not rude, just to get this kind of replies that basically say, we don't care about your problem, read the fucking manual, do whatever it says here, and hopefully that helps. I just don't get it. I mean, Logitech is charging quite a lot of money for these devices, and I'm starting to ask, where does this money go? Because the quality obviously is declining, from what I can tell. The support is not existing. So really, this leaves me with a really bad feeling about Logitech as a whole. And as I said in the beginning, I was always quite a fan of Logitech, and on my main system I've always used Logitech Gaming mouse and keyboard, and also on my secondary PC I have a slightly cheaper Logitech keyboard and mouse, and I was always happy and I was always actually recommending Logitech to others. But this whole experience feels bad in each and every way. It feels bad that the keyboard in general has this failure built into it. It feels bad that it's really not serviceable, and it also feels really bad that the support is basically not caring at all about what I have to say. I'm gonna leave it at that. Thanks for taking your time to stick around until now. I hope you can maybe also clean or replace your Rotary encoder, and I hope that you maybe learned something in this video. Have a good day. Bye bye.